Hey everyone, welcome back to Steve's View. Today we're diving into a major political shakeup inside Ukraine, one that's already being called the biggest non-military earthquake in the country since the war began. And it centers on a single figure, Andriy Yermak, President Zelensky's chief of staff, closest advisor, and arguably the second most powerful man in Ukraine. Let's break down what happened, why it matters, and what this could mean for the war, for Ukraine's politics, and for the country's relationship with the United States. Earlier last week, Andriy Yermak announced his resignation after Ukraine's anti-corruption watchdogs carried out surprise raids on his home and office. These agencies have been stepping up investigations for weeks, but until now, they hadn't touched anyone at Yermak's level. His influence was so extensive that many Ukrainians described him as having power almost equal to Zelensky himself. To understand the gravity of this, you have to know Yermak's role since 2022. As Russian forces invaded, he became the central power broker inside Kyiv. He concentrated decision-making in his own office, pushed rivals aside, installed loyalists in key institutions, controlled who could meet the president, and shaped nearly every major political and diplomatic decision. There were even reports that he and Zelensky lived in the same underground bunker at one point, a symbol of how intertwined their political survival had become. But over the past few months, corruption scandals began to hit the Ukrainian government hard. A major $100 million energy fraud case triggered public outrage. Protesters accused Yermak of enabling Ukraine's old oligarch-style networks to re-emerge during wartime. And he didn't help his own case when he tried to weaken the very anti-corruption agencies that are now investigating him. So when investigators finally searched his office, it shocked the entire country. Yermak's fall didn't happen in a vacuum. It comes at a moment when Ukraine is facing some of its toughest months since the invasion. Ukrainian forces are slowly losing ground. Russia has taken the battlefield initiative. Western aid is uncertain, and Zelensky's domestic approval has dropped sharply, mostly because of corruption scandals and military setbacks. All of this weakened the president's political position. And when a leader weakens, people around him become vulnerable too. Even someone as powerful as Yermak. Here's another important angle. Yermak was extremely unpopular in Washington, across both parties. In D.C., officials complained that Yermak obstructed anti-corruption reforms, complicated U.S.-Ukraine communication, interfered in Ukraine's military chain of command, blocked U.S. officials from speaking directly with Ukrainian generals, and resisted nearly every peace proposal the U.S. floated. Republicans and Democrats, who rarely agree on anything, both described him as a problem. The Trump team disliked him even more. Earlier this year, when Vice President J.D. Vance's office called General Zelensky, the former commander-in-chief, to ask whether he'd consider stepping in as Zelensky's successor, Yermak reportedly pressured Zelensky not to answer the phone. For U.S. policymakers, Yermak wasn't just controversial. He was viewed as an obstacle. Now, did the United States directly engineer his fall? Most analysts say no. The U.S. cannot openly interfere in Ukraine's domestic politics. Doing so would damage Kyiv's legitimacy and backfire strategically. But the U.S. almost certainly applied indirect pressure, including private diplomatic messages linking aid to anti-corruption requirements, sharing intelligence about corruption, and making it clear they didn't want Yermak involved in peace negotiations. So, the U.S. probably did not push him out, but it definitely saw his departure as convenient. Even without U.S. pressure, Yermak had accumulated many enemies inside Ukraine. He clashed with the military. He clashed with anti-corruption agencies. He controlled access to Zelensky. He was accused of influencing high-level appointments. And he was linked, at least politically, to several scandals. This created a dangerous dynamic. The man with the most power also carried the most resentment. So, when the anti-corruption agencies finally raided his house. It wasn't just a legal action. It was the release of years of internal tension. The real formula behind his fall looks something like this: internal rivalries, plus corruption investigations, plus U.S. pressure, plus Zelensky's shrinking political capital equals Yermak's removal became inevitable. After resigning, Yermak did something unusual. He went straight to the front lines in eastern Ukraine and volunteered to join combat units. Before leaving, he said, "My conscience is clear. Time will judge everything." And then he added something much more politically loaded. "I did everything I could. I negotiated with the Americans. I prevented Trump's 28 demands from being forced on Ukraine." That sentence was seen as a final shot, a suggestion that he believed he was a shield protecting Ukraine from a peace deal he considered unacceptable. Does his resignation mean peace is coming? Not necessarily, but it does shift the landscape. Yermak was one of the strongest opponents of territorial compromise with Russia. He repeatedly argued that victory, not negotiation, was the only path to peace, even though Ukraine's military situation has worsened dramatically. Now that he's gone, Kyiv may find it easier to explore talks with Washington's help. But there are still major obstacles. Zelensky says Ukraine will not trade land for peace. Russia still holds battlefield advantage, and Putin may not feel any urgency to negotiate. If there is a shift, it will be slow. So what does this moment really represent? It signals two things. One, Ukraine's democratic institutions are not dead. The fact that anti-corruption agencies raided the office of the second most powerful person in the country during wartime shows that some checks and balances are still functioning. Two, Ukraine's political system is entering a new phase. This could be a chance to shift diplomatic strategy, a chance to clean up wartime governance, or the beginning of deeper political instability. It could go either way. Yermak's resignation doesn't automatically bring peace or reform. But it is a rare moment of accountability in a country that has struggled with corruption and internal power struggles for decades. Whether this becomes a turning point or just another chapter in Ukraine's political turmoil depends on what Zelensky does next and who replaces Yermak. For now, one thing is clear. Ukraine is entering a new, uncertain, but potentially transformative stage of the war.